The Swatara Creek, nicknamed Swati, is a 72-mile-long tributary of the Susquehanna River, passing through 3 counties, draining into the Susquehanna at Middletown and Dauphin County. The name Swatara is believed to be derived from a word in the Susquehanna dialect, Shwahadari or Shahagawa, which means where we feed on eels. In the earliest recorded surveys, it is written Sahatawara, later Swatora, finally becoming Swatara. It is believed Paleo-Indians, the first inhabitants of the Americas, traveled in nomadic bands and crossed Beringia, a land bridge connecting Asia and America during the last glacial age. Paleo-Indians presumably followed migrating caribou into the northeast and believed that their territories were wide-ranging based on their use of exotic stone for spear points, with some of the stone coming from several hundred miles away. Stone tools and spear points on Paleo-Indian sites have been carbon dated from 16,000 years to as much as 30,000 years. These Native Americans skillfully managed the natural abundancy of the Susquehanna River region by living in accordance with the seasons. They hunted, fished, gathered nuts and berries and other wild foods, and cultivated corn, beans, and squash. Ancient eel weirs have been discovered in numerous locations of the Susquehanna River, being built from stacked river rocks in the shape of a V to funnel and catch migrating eels. As the eels swam downstream, the walls of the weir funneled them to a narrow point where they could be captured and traps or speared more easily. One reason for the weirs is that the snake-like eels were a primary source of food for people living in the area for perhaps thousands of years, and with the use of weirs, catching fish required little effort and risk. Newly arrived colonists, copying Native American techniques, commandeered the weirs and built new ones. Before large-scale European settlement, Native American tribes in Pennsylvania engaged in trade with the Dutch, French, and Swedish in the early 1600s. The exact date is unknown, but in 1608, John Smith of Jamestown noted that they had been trading French goods. The fur trade was a major factor for European colonization of North America. One of the most sought-after articles by the tribes was the European long rifle. As European settlers moved in, the Susquehanna made alliances to trade with them. They first befriended the French by 1615, the English by 1625, and the Dutch by 1630. The Susquehannocks were the only tribe to establish and maintain trading with all 3 of these competing European people. They traded various goods such as farm foods and materials, but their main trading commodities were beaver skins and furs. Due to trade deals that the Susquehannocks were getting from the English fur traders, the Iroquois Confederacy began warring against many nations in the region, most notably the Beaver Wars, in order to monopolize the richest fur-bearing streams. By 1675, the Susquehannocks were almost totally annihilated by an invading Iroquois and a smallpox epidemic brought by the Europeans. The Susquehanna tribe would never rebound by the time of the Revolutionary War. Presumably, the existing remnants were all but absorbed by other tribes, mainly the Shawnees. February 2nd, 1701, at a council held in Philadelphia, remnants of the Susquehannocks, after merging with the Delaware and Shawnees, made a treaty with William Penn. This treaty formalized the purchase of land in Pennsylvania and formalized an amicable relationship between the Quakers and the Indians for nearly 100 years. The Susquehannocks may have been here as early as 1000 AD, but presumably have been preceded by countless other people groups and may have reached their peak in the years 1400 to 1500 AD. English Admiral Sir William Penn, father of William Penn, was a famous seaman, a national hero, and received knighthood. When King Charles I was beheaded for treason in 1649, Penn Sr. supported the anti-monarchy that replaced the deposed ruler. However, when it became clear that this Republican experiment would fail, he helped restore the dead king's exiled son, Charles II, in 1660, to which Admiral Penn quickly won the royal family's esteem. Charles II was one of England's most popular English kings and was considered the merry monarch by his court, living from May 1630 to February 1685. Throughout his life, Admiral Penn loaned large sums of money to the crown. As the years accumulated, so did the interest on the debt. By 1680, 10 years after Admiral Penn's death, King Charles II found himself indebted to the Penn family for £16,000 sterling. And on March 1st, 1681, Charles II of England granted the province of Pennsylvania to William Penn to settle the debt owed to Penn's father. With Penn's instilled Quaker feeling of humility in the proposed naming of his new colony, he originally wanted to name it New Wales, due to the hilly terrain of the Welsh countryside, but faced fierce opposition. His next suggestion was Sylvania, after the Latin word for forest. Charles II suggested the name Pennsylvania in honor of the elder Penn, and with the council's approval, the name Pennsylvania was formally decreed. John Fisher, great-grandfather of George Fisher, was born in Lancashire, England in 1646. He married Margaret and had 6 children: Sarah, Alice, Anne, James, John, and Thomas. The first 4 died without issue. He and his wife were both said to have been passengers on the ship Welcome. The ship's master was Robert Greenway, and they probably brought with them at least 2 of the oldest of their 6 children. Records indicate that they may have actually been passengers on the Lamb, one of the 20 other ships in Penn's flotilla. His son, John II, married Catherine and had 4 children: John, James, William, and Anne. He died at Shippen Street in Philadelphia before the Revolution. His son, John III, married Elizabeth Light first and Grace Lloyd second. He had 3 children: John, William, and George. His son, John, became a merchant in Jamaica and had a son and daughter. William died without issue. His youngest son, George, married Hannah Chamberlain and settled at the mouth of the Swatara in 1752, laid out the town of Middletown in 1755, and died in 1776. He left 3 children: George, John, and Hannah. In his colony, Penn strived to create a safe haven for his fellow Quakers and other religious minorities who would all ideally be granted freedom of worship. He often described the master plan as a holy experiment. To entice fellow Europeans into buying land in Pennsylvania, he distributed pamphlets advertising the place's qualities in English, French, Dutch, and German. Soon after his arrival in 1682, Penn divided the province of Pennsylvania into 3 counties: Bucks, Chester, and Philadelphia. By the act of May 10, 1729, Lancaster County was separated from Chester, and in 1784 a proposition was made to the Assembly to form the present Dauphin County. Born February 10, 1732 in Lancaster County, George Fisher received from his parents a tract of land purchased by his great-grandfather John Fisher in Paxton Township, Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. On part of this tract was laid out and founded the town of Middletown. George married Hannah Chamberlain and settled into the mouth of the Swatara in 1752 and had 3 children: George, John, and Hannah, and in 1755 laid out the town of Middletown, so called because it was between the cities of Lancaster and Harrisburg. George Fisher then lived in a, quote, well-cultivated estate called Pineford Farm until the time of his death in 1776. On June 10, 1774, 2 years before the Declaration of Independence, a meeting was held with nearly 100 in attendance at Tinian, the fine stone home of Colonel James Byrd. A document was presented, co-authored and signed by Byrd, formally entitled The Middletown Resolves. The document was presented by Elijah Wickersham to the General Committee of Lancaster County. The committee was composed of James Byrd, Joseph Shearer, and John Backenstow, being chaired by Byrd. The Middletown Resolves are a group of resolutions formally protesting the oppressive acts of Britain's Parliament against the American colonists. Born at Ormstown, Scotland, March 10, 1726, Colonel James Byrd was one of the earliest citizens of Middletown, coming from Philadelphia in 1747 or 1748 after working as a merchant. On May 14, 1748, he married Sarah Plumley Shippen, daughter of former Mayor Edward Shippen of the prominent Shippen family of Philadelphia. In 1756, Byrd and his family settled in Lancaster County, but soon joining the military, serving during the 7 Years' War and French and Indian Wars, subsequently being promoted to the rank of colonel in 1758. The couple had 22 children, 8 of which lived till maturity. In spite of holding different religious and political views, Byrd and George Fisher developed a distinct friendship, a friendship which would be bonded by marriages and continue through several generations. So when George Fisher settled on his estate in 1752 and laid out the town in 1755, Byrd moved with his family to his nearby farm, Tinian, in Highspire, merely 2 miles away. Colonel Byrd died at Tinian, his farm near Highspire, Dauphin County, on October 5, 1793. He and his wife are buried near the entrance in the old Presbyterian Cemetery, Middletown, Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. Prehistoric eel weirs found in numerous locations throughout eastern North America provided a useful means of harvesting eels and other aquatic foods before the woodland period, which stretched from 500 BC to 1100 AD. Eels have been reported to be plentiful and a staple in the diet of both the indigenous tribal groups as well as European settlers through the latter 18th century, being carried on stringers through the streets, rapidly being purchased by residents, tavern owners, and shopkeepers as quickly as they could. Fishermen have until recent years harvested a remarkable quantity of fish and eels, often bushels at a time, from the nearby river and creek. The Swatara was a significant transportation route in the colonial period of North America up to the late 19th century. A canal linking the Susquehanna and Delaware valleys in southeastern Pennsylvania was first proposed in 1690 by William Penn, the founder of the Pennsylvania colony, and nearly a century passed before a route for the canal was surveyed sometime between 1762 and 1770. 2 ships in the United States Navy have been named USS Swatara after the creek. The first USS Swatara launched in 1865 and dismantled in 1872 to become the second ship of this name. The second USS Swatara launched in 1873 and was decommissioned in 1891. 3 water companies, Suez Water Pennsylvania, American Water, and the Lebanon Water Authority, draw drinking water for hundreds of thousands of residents of the Swatara watershed. Centuries before the construction of Middletown's county and aqueduct bridges, and during the time of the occupation of Shawnee's villages, several ferries operated along the banks of the Swatara Creek and Susquehanna River of 3 noted sea graves on the Port Royal, present-day Royalton side, Wagner's, where the aqueduct bridge now stands, and an unnamed ferry, presumably the site of the Swatara Ferry House, or at times called the Old Fort, where a canal feeder ran down along the creek from the county bridge to the Pennsylvania Canal. The Swatara Ferry House boasts a rich history spanning centuries. The present structure was built around 1812 on the site of an 18th century structure used as a frontier fort, then referred to as the garrison, which housed Hessian soldiers captured at Trenton during the Revolutionary War, and a strategic location against Indian attack. One of 2 points where travelers were ferried across the Swatara Creek, and in the mid-1800s the log cabin was used as the home of a ferry operator. The current so-called Old Fort was not a fort and reportedly is not as old as local legend suggests. However, still very important, representing a type of structure that has not survived in any number in Pennsylvania. The Swatara Ferry House is the sole survivor in Dauphin County. The Old Fort is a 1 1/2 story log house with a full stone foundation and cellar. It was built in two sections, the second section being a mirror image of the first. Each section has a separate entrance and chimney, and each section had a basically German floor plan. The left-hand or first section of the building was constructed of full dovetail niching on all four corners. The right-hand section was similarly constructed except where it adjoins the first. The mugs were mortised into a vertical post. The use of machine-cut nails throughout the structure implies that it was built after 1800. Early deeds from the other properties in Portsmouth reserved the right to operate a ferry across the Swatara Creek to Lot 62, suggesting that the building was there by 1812. Surviving multiple floods, most notably in the years 1889, 1894, 1904, 1936, and 1972, the structure still stands, a testament to its rich history and the perseverance of its owners, both past and present. A majority of the records of ownership is unknown, but some of the property records indicate ownership as follows: George Fisher, Esquire, in 1808, John Swar in 1809, Peter Fishburne in 1827, and sometime between 1875 and 1949, Jacob Follinger owned the property, subsequently gifting it to his daughter, Bertha Romaine Follinger, and his son-in-law, Leroy Preston Hernizey, as a wedding present, and 3 generations of the Hernizey family continued to live there until 1974. Then purchased by the Dauphin County Redevelopment Authority, then being purchased and currently owned, restored, and maintained by the Middletown Historical Society and placed on the National Register of Historic Places Inventory, September 27, 1976. Reported in an article in the Harrisburg Telegraph dated April 10, 1910, 75 buildings were destroyed as a fire swept through the business section of Middletown, an important manufacturing town with a population of 10,000, causing over 400,000 or $12.3 million worth of damage today. The town was in danger for about 2 hours until the combined efforts of firemen from Middletown, Harrisburg, Lancaster, Columbia, and Steelton, and the use of explosives, the spread of the fire was contained. In 1615, the river was first traveled by French explorer Etienne Brulé. By the early 18th century, William Penn, founder of the Pennsylvania colony, after personally exploring the interior, negotiated with the Lenape to allow white settlement in the area between the Delaware and Susquehanna rivers, which was part of Lenape territory. In late colonial times, the river became an increasingly important transportation corridor from New York to Maryland. The Susquehanna River is a major river located in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States. At 444 miles long, it is the longest river on the east coast of the United States. The Susquehanna forms two main branches, the North Branch, which rises in Cooperstown, New York, and is regarded by mapmakers as the main branch, or headwaters, and the West Branch, which rises in western Pennsylvania and joins the main branch near Northumberland in central Pennsylvania. The river drains 27,000 square miles, including nearly half the land area of Pennsylvania, and empties into the northern end of the Chesapeake Bay, providing half of the bay's freshwater inflow. Due to its heavy precipitation and gale force winds, Hurricane Agnes was cited as the worst natural disaster in Pennsylvania history. It first began June 14, 1972 as a Category 1 hurricane originating in the Caribbean Sea, quickly developing into a tropical depression. More than 60,000 homes and businesses were destroyed, causing $3 billion in damages, with a reported 128 deaths. The Susquehanna River and Swatara Creek make Middletown extremely susceptible to flooding, not to mention the heavy rains and springtime thaws with the changing seasons. Middletown has experienced flooding before, but pale in comparison to the Agnes flood. Hurricane Agnes was devastating to nearly every location in its path, costing billions in damages, not to mention the emotional toll on its residents caused by Agnes. The 3 Mile Island accident involved a partial meltdown of the 3 Mile Island Unit 2 reactor, TMI-2. Beginning at 4:00 a.m. on March 28, 1979, it remains the most significant accident in U.S. commercial nuclear power plant history. On the 7-point nuclear event scale, it is rated level 5, accident with wider consequences. The accident culminated anti-nuclear safety concerns among activists and the general public, and resulted in new regulations in the nuclear industry. The partial meltdown resulted in the release of radioactive gases and radioactive iodine into the environment. Anti-nuclear movement activists expressed concerns about regional health effects from the accident, prompting studies analyzing the rate of cancer in and around the area since the accident, but did not find any statistically significant increase while others did. Cleanup from the accident started in August 1979 and officially ended in December 1993 at a cost of nearly $3 billion. Dismantling continues and will take years to complete, while the memory of the date of March 28, 1979 will continue for generations.